Hi everyone, Patty Cake here. Just an average music listener, but it's finally time to review this new collab album from Wax and DJ Hoppa, Highway Hotel. Here we have the newest and not only the 9th full-length album from East Coast's own rapper, singer, songwriter, comedian, Wax, but also like the 20th something album from producer DJ Hoppa. Now I'm going to preface this review by saying that while Wax and DJ Hoppa are both equally as involved in the making of this album, I will be mostly focusing on talking about this through the perspective of if Wax was the only creator. Not that Hoppa didn't play an important role in the rollout or creating the album, but I have a lot more interesting things to talk about with Wax rather than Hoppa. Not that he's not going to be talked about at all, but he'll play less of a relevant role, especially since that he is the producer while Wax is kind of like the main MC, if that makes any sense. When we talk about Wax and DJ Hoppa's position in the hip-hop industry, it really boils down to being on the fine line between being like at the top of the underground scene while also being at the bottom of the mainstream. Wax's career has been very sporadic up until this point because if you saw him anywhere in the 2010s, you probably saw him collaborating with a lot of mainstream internet trends at that point, like Your Favorite Martian, Epic Rap Out of the History, and even snagging features with prominent figures like Open Mike Eagle, Razel, even Anderson .Paak. While less to say about DJ Hoppa, it is important to note that he was part of the Funk Volume collective led by Hopsin, but in my opinion, that's not really somebody you should be really bragging about hanging around. Despite all of the fame they could have had, they've mostly stuck to their independent roots, and regardless if you believe that it was a good decision or not, it has given these artists a station to release their music that, while they won't be making any waves in the mainstream, it will make the fans that they do have revel in their works. However, up until the point of this album's release, these two saw very little collaborative efforts with each other, only having 4 singles before Highway Hotel's rollout. And while I didn't listen to Unhinged, I did listen to Abhorrent, I'm Sick of Christmas, and even Fantastic Grace, but these 3 singles didn't really have that much correlation with each other stylistically, so I had like no idea what I was gonna expect when I first listened to the album. As for my expectations with Wax, I honestly just hope that he would put out a decent album at this point. Wax isn't really known for being the most consistent rapper. A lot of his albums and tracks in the past have been very hit or miss for me personally, not only in terms of the quality of the tracks, but also the flow. And when Wax said that the entire theme of this album was just songs they made while touring, it kind of made me nervous for an entire roller coaster of just quality, which is honestly pretty disappointing considering his last record was very consistent, Lifetime Achievement Award. At the time, I kind of thought of it as Tyler the Creator's Chromacopia to Don't Tap the Glass transition, but I guess this one is a lot worse because it's written by Wax. But before we actually dive into the record, I just want to make a comment about the album's art direction. It's really gross and disgusting. I don't mean to diss Chris Gipple's art style or anything, but I wholeheartedly believe that this might be the ugliest album art that Wax has ever rolled out, maybe even worse than McGregor's Scatterbrain back in 2003. And I know it's supposed to invoke like a psychedelic feeling to it, but it just looks really ugly. In fact, some of the friends that I showed this record to, they thought the cover was AI generated, and honestly, I would believe it. There are some inconsistencies on there that kind of make it look a bit off, and I would like to call Chris Gipple to the stand about that, but you know, it's subjective. But while we're on the topic of AI generated art, can we talk about the single art real quick? Because that's definitely AI generated. Yeah, Wax basically just shit on us with all these AI generated art for the singles, and while he labeled it as drawn by Galen Fraser, I can't tell if it's a problem with Wax being old or something because it's really bad. I did try reaching out to Wax on this issue, and while I want to give the benefit of the doubt that Galen Fraser's art style is just really, really ugly and fake, if you just go to Galen Fraser's website, it's just AI generated t-shirts and merch. It's really awful. So Wax, I advise you to just look into your graphic artists a little more clearly next time, maybe. I think that would be a good change for all of us. And if these single cover arts didn't give an immediate good impression of the album, just wait until you hear the actual music on the album, starting with the lead single, She Ain't Mine, with Little Stranger and Jarf, which might have been the absolute worst single they could have put out. While DJ Hoppa puts up a relatively smooth beat with these atmospheric jazz instruments and vocal harmonizations by John Shields of Little Stranger, the MCs themselves that do their verses really don't sound good at all. Jarv starts the track off with the first verse, and while it isn't the worst verse ever, I'd say, it is definitely very forgettable and very lowbrow. It feels more like a topical introduction rather than an actual verse, really. Talking about girls that are just rejecting guys, even though they have no idea what's going on. Wax easily has the best verse on this track, but it's not really a competition. His lyrics are admittedly funny, but because of how uninteresting and boring he sounds, any humor that he could be dishing out is just immediately washed out by how vapid and uninterested he sounds. I was walking through a park, looking at a squirrel. Corner of my eye spies the finest girl that I witnessed in a minute. She was seated on a fountain, giving me the eye, so I swooped in like a falcon. Though all of this pales in comparison to how terrible Kevin Shields' verse is, the final one on the song. He definitely has the most interesting flow, albeit a little ugly, but what he delivers lyrically is kind of rapey and misogynistic. The girl that he's trying to see isn't budging, so he constantly insists on trying to pry her feelings and dreaming of her in a thong, which is just gross. Later on in the verse, however, we actually find out that this girl's a lesbian, and Kevin Shields follows up this discovery with probably some of the worst metaphors I've ever heard in my life. She want the biscuit with no gravy, pink triangles got her wavy, and only bazungas drive her crazy. The way Kevin Shields talks about girls makes him sound incredibly misogynistic, or he's just incredibly gay or something, because who the hell unironically says bazungas in the big year of 2026? Yeah, right after that, Kevin Shields realizes that they both like the exact same thing, so he invites her onto the bus like a woman would want to do something like catcall random ladies off the street. Yeah, Wax, so much for shit I used to do, I guess. That song is just useless now, I suppose. This was not a good start for the record, but hey, at least Wax followed it up with a pretty good song, Patience, featuring Watsky and Krista Youngs. Wax isn't really known for writing terribly deep lyrics, so naturally I didn't really expect any lyrical improvements from his other songs. But that being said, I can appreciate the song for sounding like it wanted to be a pop hit in the same vein that tracks like Better When You're High tried to be, and coincidentally, they both feature Krista Youngs. I think it's one of Wax's better attempts at it, especially since it features Mr. Pale Kids Rap Fast, George Watsky, ironically on a song about taking life slow, and it is a fun gimmick, but Watsky does kind of underperform. Overall though, this track seemed like a lot of fun to make, and I think that's kind of like the motto of Highway Hotel. Wax and DJ Hoppa aren't really seeking out to make the most game-changing album of all time. They're kind of just trying to have fun making music with their friends, which is probably why this is the most guest and feature dense album Wax has ever put out, which is probably not something very new to DJ Hoppa since he only makes collaborative producer albums anyway. This entire album feels like a Hoppa and Friends record, except now instead of Hoppa and Friends, it's now Wax and Friends, and they kind of clash their friends groups together to create the ultimate underground summer bash album they could possibly make. So, fun and freedom are the names of the game, and you can see it in a lot of tracks like the opening one, Floatin' with Sump, which if you watched a video on it, you would know that it was a 3-day endeavor to record an entire song in a Holiday Inn and then perform it live. Once again, Hoppa hooks us up with this dope-ass chopped jazz instrument beat, but on top of that, Wax's bars are really underwhelming. I want to go easy on the track considering the nature of how it was made, but that doesn't take away from the fact that Wax's lyrics just sound straight from a unfiltered freestyle, similar to how Bike Rap was made, but definitely a lot worse, since none of the lyrics are really anything witty. I hop up on the track, so it's probably gonna slap. Feet up in the van and proceed to write a verse and a set list, plus add your moms to the guest list. Me and Hoppa take you higher than a palm tree frond trimmer. Okay. However, I do dig the lines about Mount Shasta during the second verse. That was pretty cool. So far, I've only listed tracks where Wax seemed to be kind of the weak link while Hoppa was kind of holding his own with his amazing production choices. But even Hoppa fails to carry the album sometimes, as we have tracks like Acai, where it generally sounds like Hoppa's trying to do his best impression of an AI chatbot given the prompt, make a track about being chill. The production sounds really generic and boring, and when you couple that with Wax's lifeless, static, uninspired flows and rhyme schemes that make him sound like a blatant Nav ripoff, which is not a good thing, the track just kind of makes me upset and groan a whole bunch rather than give me the feeling of serenity. I can see the future and it's a whole lot to see. A red light on the street, the only thing that's stopping me. Rolling through the city in the morning feeling free. Ain't nobody barking orders, only boss I got is me. I'm just trying to live my life optimally. If you got a negative opinion, you can leave. Dude, just say something interesting for once. I know it's supposed to be like a chill and relax song, but it makes me feel nothing. Even on tracks where Hoppa's trying to be more energetic with his production, it all still just sounds really flat, most evidently on Pay Up with Khan and Jaren Benton. Surprisingly, Wax's first attempt at writing a gangsta rap song, if you could ever believe it. To couple it with how intense this track is supposed to sound, each verse becoming more aggressive, confrontational, violent than the previous, he comprises the beat of mostly these fanfare-esque horns that sound like they complement the track from a distance, but the more you listen to it, the more these horns sound very repetitive and bland. It doesn't complement the progression of the track at all, and by the end it's kind of a letdown, to be honest. Additionally, you can tell that Wax has never written a track like this because not only is his flow boring, once again, but his lyrics are so awkward and lazy. You know the deal, if you don't, shoulda read it. It's too late now for the last minute edit. I knew you had an excuse before you even said it. I trusted you, now I regret it. What? He has the worst verse on this track because of that, which honestly, are we surprised at this point? Wax is basically outclassed on all these tracks because for the most part, his flows are always so boring and clunky. All the other MCs bring so much more to the track than Wax does, and when he's on his own, he always sounds so underwhelming. He might have the best verse on like 1 or 2 tracks, but that's about it. So if Wax can't rap, then all he has is his pen game, and when he dishes out tracks like Megadeth, I can't really defend him at all. This track is bad. It's really bad because Wax tries to pose as this edgelord metalhead, but with his corny old dad bars, it might be just like the worst lyrics he's ever written on any song he's ever made, period. It reads like something off a cheesier version of Falling Universe's Popular Monster, if you know what I mean. I like my fish mispronounced. I tell the waiter, bring the salmon out. Yeah, because mispronouncing fish is the #1 most punk thing you could ever do in your life. And this one has a weird flow to it. You ought not to want to bite the tentacle off of the octopus that feeds you like it was pasta. Ugh. You got a learner's permit, I got a CDL, and my bumper sticker reads, I'm a demon from hell. I got a leg up, you gon' need a stilt. Y'all stall, I keep trucking like Peterbilt. Stop! Stop this! This is not funny or punk! What the fuck is this? The instrumentation is also terrible because even if Wax was edgy and demonic on this track, Hoppa's production is just so nothing until the end when he brings out this hard rock outro that lasts for 10 seconds, which is still pretty ugly. Then there's the outro track, Afterlife, where Wax tries to paint the story of a guy who wants to be a basketball star, but apparently he's too short. So he meets a witch that makes him taller and successful, but then he dies in a car accident that is caused by his abnormal height. The entire moral of the story is having to choose between a short-lived life or a life lived short, which might just be the dumbest lesson Wax has ever written for a song, maybe even worse than The Adventures of Larry and Tina. I personally dislike fantastical story-esque tracks where it tries to paint the life of a guy in a sort of comedic fashion. It just comes off very corny and unwitty. So is that it? Is there no saving grace to this album? Is it quite possibly the worst thing Wax has ever written in his entire career? Well, no. There are fortunately some tracks that I actually quite like on this thing. Fat Joe with Demrick and Kale Problems is one of the better chill tracks on here, backed up with Hoppa's smooth, reverberated electronic instrumentation. Wax actually has a really good verse on here, his best on the entire album, really. And the chorus, while annoying after some time, it's really catchy. Even though Demrick's verse is quite forgettable on this one, I do appreciate Kale Problems picking up the slack and ending off the entire thing with this really long verse, but if I had to give one criticism of it, I do think it's a bit directionless and random. He kind of just jumps around topic to topic, talking about being a hopeless romantic and poverty, trying to fill up his verse with filler words before the end, really. I mean, if he restructured his lines better, it could probably be a really neat feature, but then you have to remember that at the end of the day, this is still a Wax track, and you're still gonna end up with some terrible bars like, true slider, like a burger snack. It is still definitely a highlight on this track list, and I do appreciate that outro section that's like tropical rock styled. Saturday was a track that I thought I was going to hate going into, but after giving it some time, I really enjoyed the different style it brings to the table. The flamenco style harkens back to Wax's song, I'm Through, but instead of talking about girls, it talks about his obsession with technology. The melodic chorus is super duper catchy. I love the dense instrumentation with the horns and the acoustic guitar. The rap bridge flows incredibly and has pretty decent lyrics. It's also backed up with these soulful vocals that remind me of EUM's production style. Rest in peace. I especially like the line that was like, I keep on getting dumber, why do you claim to be so smart? And also that last bar about the phone charger in the closed casket. Overall, this track is really fun and well put together. Feeding Frenzy was also another one that I thought I was going to hate going into, mostly because of the really weird title, but Wax does a really good job at combining conscious lyrics with the serenity of the other tracks without making the soundscape feel bland. The song starts off with the same day, different perspective motto and splits up the song into 2 different verses with 2 contrasting ideologies, lifestyles, and headspaces, and this structure allows Wax to express his yearning for peace without pandering on and on about nothing for 2 minutes like the rest of the tracks do. With the echoey minimal jazz instrumentation going on in the background, this could have easily been one of the most sophisticated tracks on its previous record, fitting in with tracks like Never Got the Chance. However, the real triumph of this album is the track Do It Again, with a plethora of Wax and DJ Hoppa's friends, the most guest dance on the entire record. Before the release, I was afraid that it was going to be some dumb braggadocious rap cipher like a lot of past Wax records have, but after listening to it, it's all just plain fun, and isn't that the name of the entire album? It has the most Highway Hotel-esque production ideas, all taking place on a touring van and every rapper just hopping onto the track like it's just a show on the road they're all being invited to. While they don't put up the most interesting verses of all time, every single rapper on this track sounds like they're having the time of their life, which perfectly encapsulates the entire concept of this record. The chorus is really catchy, the jazzy western production is super awesome, and it is by far the best track on the record. With 13 tracks spanning for a little under 40 minutes, I can tell that this is going to be a summer anthem for Wax and DJ Hoppa fans alike. But to me personally, even accounting for all the fun ideas, I'm still struggling to find a way how this would outclass any records that do this type of style better. I mean, seriously, I would rather listen to the Cookout Chronicles than like 80% of this album's material, especially since that mixtape has better track-by-track flow anyway, which, if I haven't made it clear, that is another serious problem of Highway Hotel. This album sees Wax exploring a lot of modern ideas and trying to fit them into one cohesive package, but I feel like the flow staggers a little bit once Wax pans out the track list and puts over-the-top tracks like Blow and Pay Up right next to tranquil tracks like Fat Joe and Acai, a concept that artists have frankly done a lot better, such as, if I can think of from the top of my head, McKinley Dixon's Recitative. You can tell Wax is trying his best to be creative despite the roadblocks, no pun intended, that he's given himself by creating an album as carefree as this, but I feel like every good thing that I could say about this album is just heavily stunted by how sloppily put together everything feels. I guess what I'm trying to say is that the songs on this record are greater individually than when they're placed alongside each other. I feel stuck wanting to give Wax some leeway because the entire thing was made on the road, but this album still feels way too directionless right after the impeccable Lifetime Achievement Award, and I'm constantly questioning to myself if Wax truly wants to improve or not. He still has ways to go with cohesion and quality control, but for his entire career, I feel like Wax has never gotten a single grasp on any of these concepts, even on his most conceptual albums, like Livin' Foul. So despite all these interesting ideas, Wax doesn't really do anything new or interesting on this album. And it's a shame, really. I'll probably still have fun re-listening to this for the highlights, but I really do hope that Wax does something really exciting for his next project. I would also recommend working on lyrics and flow, since a lot of what Wax brings to this album in particular is very old and dry. As for notes for DJ Hoppa, your production is very hit or miss, I suppose. Some of the vocal mixing could have been executed a lot better. As for some tracks like You've Changed, Wax just sounds really bad for no reason, but overall though, you did a decent job. And that's why I'm feeling a strong 4 to a light 5 on this thing. Tran